thank you guys for braving the monsoon to be here. And we have an incredible guest speaker tonight, so I think it'll be worth your while. Full disclosure, I got OPP, old people problems, so that's why I had to take off my boots, so please forgive me. It has nothing to do with you guys not deserving the absolute best. So, first, before we get started, I want to say one thing about Dr. Michelle Banks. She doesn't like being called doctor, but she earned that. So, for first reference, thank you, doctor, for being here. First, tell us exactly what you do.
I am a curator with the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. And the festival is not a museum, so that's the important thing for folks to remember. The festival has been around since 1967. It's sort of a living museum. And there's this great quote from a former Smithsonian undersecretary. He talks about the museum being a noun and the festival being a verb. And it's a convening. It's a convening of festival visitors and participants. It's a convening of culture and tradition bearers and families and children. And it's an opportunity for people to tell their stories. So when you go to the museum, you don't often have an opportunity to meet the artist or be interact with the artist. The festival creates this space where the artist and the maker and people are able to have these conversations, and it's conversations with people who visit, and it's conversations among the different makers who we bring together. And this year, 2025, we're extremely excited about the festival program. When you came in, there were some slides running, Youth in the Future of Culture. And this is a program that is, it was originally called Looking Forward, Youth in the Future of Culture. And that looking forward was really important. That looking forward, we talk about, oh, youth in the future, et cetera, without always recognizing that young people are doing things in the here and now. So this is a program about the present. We're looking into the past, but talking about the present. Just doing research for this program. Otis Redding was 23 years old when he wrote and recorded Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. Wow. Imagine that, right? Wow. One of my colleagues, Sojin Kim, who's here tonight, and I were in Sacramento last spring, and we had this incredible lunch with some members of the Royal Chicano Air Force, and this was they're not even in their 70s and 80s and 90s in some cases. And this is the group, there's like iconic logos and other things for the Chicano movement in the 60s and 70s. And some of them were just out of high school when they started this work, but their work became like the center of this movement. And of course, SNCC, of course, Martin Luther King was a baby when he started his activism work. So this program is really about celebrating how young people are doing. And we're thinking about them as makers and doers themselves. We're thinking about them and the intergenerational work that they're involved in. I was looking at the video, and how special is it when you have a young person who goes through the program, goes off, goes to college, and then comes back to the program to teach in that program because they believe in that work. That's a really important and special story. So we're celebrating young people, we're celebrating the mentors. You gotta be a special person to work with young people, which I've done all my life. So that's what the program is about. And just one last thing, 2026, of course, is the 70th centennial. And really sort of thinking about how important it is to sort of thinking of youth as sort of this launching pad for, sort of this marking of the 250th, marking of the 250 of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So thinking about how, thinking about looking at the past, but also thinking about young people by reflecting on what young people bring and what the future is. So that looking forward is also that looking for the festival, is also that looking forward to 2026.
Now, you talk about young people, and you're still in that category, okay? Let's talk a little bit about you as a curator. We had a conversation, a group of us earlier, a few days ago, and one of the quotes that stood out to me and my colleague and friend Karen was when you said, "I do hard work grounded in community."
Oh, hard work, Yeah.
So that hard work may be hard, but when you talk about it, it is as if it is the greatest labor of love you've ever done. Tell us about that and being a curator.
So it's actually what I call hard work, and hard work is relational work. I've come through a lot of I wouldn't say that my journey here has been.
Start there.
Yeah. So my journey here was not always, it wasn't a smooth journey. It certainly wasn't a linear journey. But what I think that hard work for me means that it's relational work. I have to live the work that I do. I can't keep it separate. If I have to write, when I'm writing for the festival blog or writing for even our website, I have to sort of understand that work in my heart. And some of that comes from sort of recent research that I've done. There is this, part of the time I live in Guatemala and I'm living with indigenous communities there. And in Maya languages, the word heart is often the root word for very simple things, like when you ask someone how they are, for example, "Suklakush," how is your heart? When you forget something, the literal translation is something like, "It was lost in my heart." So it's all this metaphor. It's like, first of all, it's just beautiful language, but it also is very much, for me, just sort of internalizing this idea that what I do has to come from here. And I think within within the academia, there's always this focus on the head. And even with my students, I talk about the head, of course, is important, but we have to figure out a way for it to align with our hearts. So, and that alignment with the heart is very much for me about working with and in community, and sort of being able to understand my relationship and my connection to community. So I try to do that in everything that I do.
Now, we're not asking you anything that you don't mind talking about. We see young people out there, and we see young at heart people out there. And sometimes we aren't always honest that the road was a little rocky. Tell us a little bit more about that journey that got you here and may clearly play a role in why you have such a heart of service.
So I was born and raised here in D.C. A lot of people say, I don't know any native Washingtonians. There are plenty of us. A lot of us can't afford to live here, but there's still some of us around. So I was born and raised in D.C. In an area called Marshall Heights, which is like one of the last little corners of Southeast before you head into like Oxon Hill and Coral Hills in that area. So that was kind of no man's land. I grew up in D.C. back in the day. People would say you didn't want to be caught in Southeast after dark. But it was rural. It was country. We raised chickens and canned vegetables, and I grew up with my great aunt and her husband, my grandmother's older sister, and they hunted and we fished in the Potomac, and there was this again, that heart. I had neighbors who would watch us go to school, and we get to the corner, and the neighbor would come out and watch us to the next one, and so it was that. So that grounding in community, that grounding in heart, actually starts from when I was a child. But I also struggled going through school. By the time I was in 9th grade, I stopped going to school in 9th grade, went back briefly in 10th grade, stopped going again to school again in 10th grade. And I would cut school and go to the library, or I would cut school and go to museums at the Smithsonian.
Full circle.
Right, full circle, right? And the community cards would be like, what are you doing here? But they would let me stay because I realize that they were probably saying to themselves that, at least we know for this few hours she's safe. So I'd be falling around behind school groups and hoping people wouldn't pay attention to me. But that was my school. And I read everything. My mom read everything, so I read everything that my mother read. Some things at 12 or 13 I probably shouldn't have read, but I read them anyway. But I wasn't in school. I was, very much an autodidact. I kind of educated myself. But when I was in 9th grade, I was part of a theater program at Planned Parenthood. and it was a peer education program, and it was a theater program. So that was the thing that I realized I liked. And eventually, when I spent 1 year at a Catholic high school, St. Cecilia's Academy on East Capitol Street, and that was the place where I realized that theater was probably the thing that could ground me, and I had wonderful teachers there. The old studio theater used to be the Church Street Theater over on 14th Street. It was this tiny little theater. I see some heads nodding. There was this tiny little theater, and one of my teachers worked there, and I used to usher there, and I saw all these things. I said, this is the thing. And I ended up going to Duke Ellington, and when I got to Ellington, that's when I realized I'm an artist, and that's why I didn't want to go to school, because I wasn't, my creativity wasn't being fed. And I did a lot of work with Arena Stage once upon a time, had a social outreach theater on called Living Stage. And Living Stage, I did a lot of work with them. And one of the things that I carry with me from that time is this Bob Alexander, who was the director at that time, used to talk about at the moment of creation, we're whole and perfect. And that's one of the things that stays with me, and one of the things that continues to guide my work. And so got through Ellington, but again, I hadn't been in schools, and I didn't have any models for going to college or anything. You know, in my head, it was like, that would be something because you saw that on television, but I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to do that. And so I left school, ended up, through summer youth employment programs here in DC, learned photography. So my first job was as a photographer on an oral history project for Latin American Youth Center. And one of my mentors, Olivia Caraval, is also here from that time. And was just introduced to these things. I never had any idea.
I want to stop right here. Then you said Olivia was a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
So often young people have mentors and they don't have the opportunity to say thank you. And she's right here. I'm sure you said thank you before, but young people are looking. Tell her what her care and concern meant to you.
Oh my, it's so nice to be saying this publicly. I don't know where I'd be. I just don't know. Thank you. I'm gonna get weepy, so I'm gonna stop. She's gonna get weepy, and we're all gonna get weepy.
And we're gonna stop just a second. How many of you mentor students? How many of you were mentored?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, because Sitar wouldn't be here if you all were not mentors. And it does mean something when you can step outside and say thank you. You can't ever say she didn't say thank you, because she's got a room full of witnesses. Now, we talked about you dropping out, you said, in the 9th grade, again in the 10th grade, and you talked about the role that the Latin Youth Center played in your life, and the lovely Olivia and others. But there was someone else who played the most critical role in your life, and we don't want to pry. We know that your mother passed away 2 years ago, but you are her living legacy. Tell us the most important thing that you carry with her, because I believe people live on as we talk about them and remember them, and we see her through you. So tell us, what is that lasting memory, those words that stay with you and guide you to this day?
Sometimes when I'm sitting on the side of the bed, I see my mother, but it's like I'm looking back at my mother and myself. But one of the last conversations I had with her, I was working on my dissertation, and it was funny, I didn't know this. My mother was at DC Teachers here in DC for, she didn't finish, but she was at DC Teachers for about 2 years, and I didn't realize she was an English major. I knew that she loved words. I think that is certainly the thing probably the most important thing that I know that she gave me. Books saved my life, and it was my mom's love for words that, and language that really got me going. And my mother was brilliant. If we lived in a better world, I don't even, she would be here. And she would be, and people would know who she was, and people would, but, it is what it is. But one of the last conversations that I had with her, COVID and traveling and not wanting to travel, and I was away, I was in Guatemala, and couldn't get here before I went back. I was teaching in Arizona at the time, and one of the last conversations I had with her, she said, you know what, I want you to write a book, she said. And I kind of rolled in my eyes, and whatever. And so the dissertation is her book. But but it is that love of language and that love of words and that love of music and that love of art and that love of creativity and creation that she gave me. And she gave me her wings and she let me fly. And so everything that I do is sort of for her.
If she were looking at you right now, you
Don't
said
you
you look at her, what do you think she would say?
I mean, she would tell me. She told me all the time she was proud of me.
Is there anything else that we as children want? As
You know.
far as to say all the hell we raised and now our parents are proud of us? So we say bravo, bravo, good job, well done. And what's your mom's name?
Teresa.
And Teresa's still, I personally believe Teresa's still
Oh,
there. She's
Teresa's
just hanging
here.
out on another plane.
She's
Time
here
to time.
here. Yeah.
You talked about Teresa, Miss Teresa, because in the African American community,
No, she was definitely Miss Teresa.
I was like, wait a minute.
Or Miss T for
Did
something.
you? Well, my name is Tanya, Miss T, and Aunt T. For a moment, I lost my mind and thought I was not African American because black folks call their elders Miss
Yeah.
or Mrs. You talked about Miss, now I have to say it, Miss T teaching you a love of words. Tell us your favorite word in the world.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think sanctuary.
Why?
Sanctuary is that place of safety, and I think that sanctuary is that place of safety, and it can be an outward space, it can be an internal space, I think. And I think that we find sanctuary in each other, and we find sanctuary in places. There was, I look at the stars. I'm kind of, I'm a stargazer, and I look at the moon, and I look at birds. I don't know what there's I'm coming from the Smithsonian. I'm crossing Pennsylvania Avenue, and every day about 6, there's like a murmuration. It's not. I don't think it's not starling, so I don't think it's officially a murmuration. But there's like this huge, like hundreds and hundreds of birds that are flying across Pennsylvania Avenue together. And I stop, and every time I see them, I just stop right there. My mouth is open, and I look up, and people are like kind of looking at me. So what is she looking at? But for me, that's sanctuary, those places of safety. And sometimes I find those places of safety in nature. I find those places of safety among people. So I think sanctuary, and I feel like it's also too this idea that we're searching for something. I think everybody's kind of searching for sanctuary in some way, or safety in some way, shape, or form, and sort of being conscious of the fact that sanctuary doesn't exist for everybody. So
It's such a powerful word.
yeah.
It's almost like a prayer.
Yeah.
We want sanctuary.
Yeah.
I found sanctuary.
And I found sanctuary.
Sitar is one of those places where
Sitar
young
is a
people are
sanctuary.
able to find sanctuary. The center that you went to. Tell us about how the Folklife Festival is a sanctuary for young people to express and tell their stories.
I think that, well, this program in particular, I think it is, but I also think that I was with, last Friday I was over in Deanwood, And there's at the Deanwood Recreation Center, there is a youth journalism project. And it's sort of this unknown thing. And this is someone who has worked in radio in DC, worked with Donnie Simpson and worked with other people. And he has these contacts with a lot of local newscasters, and they come in and do workshops with these students. And he's got kids at USC on full scholarships, and at Hampton on full scholarships, and all Georgetown finishing up on full scholarships. And these are kids from Deanwood, and those are the kids that are the ones that people are saying the at risk and all these other things. And when I went to talk to them, I was like, how many of you know the festival? Nobody. How often do you go to the Smithsonian? Like one or two hands went up. And one of the things that, again, I grew up here, and I grew up in the city, and one of the things that I want to be able to tell young people is that this whole city is yours. If you were born here, the whole city is yours.
Can you say that louder?
If you're born here, this whole city is yours. And I went to my 30th class reunion from Ellington some years ago, and my principal was there. It was lovely to see him, but one of the things he talked about was the fact that one of his joys about being the principal at Ellington was that you had all these kids coming from across the river and coming from Southeast and going into Georgetown. And for him, that was so important. I hadn't really thought about it. My commute was like, oh my gosh, my commute was horrible. But it was also, Ellington was that place where I realized that this whole city was mine, and if I lived here, then I should have access to those things. So one of the things we want to do with this festival program, and I want to do with this festival program, is to let young people, particularly in the city, knowing that when you cross Pennsylvania Avenue, there's that DC Washington thing, but when you cross Pennsylvania Avenue, that's still your city, and you have a place there. The mall is America's front yard. The mall has hundreds of during the festival, there's hundreds of thousands of people crossing through, coming from all over the country, coming from all over the world. And to be able to give, when I mentioned that, someone was like, how many people come through? I think they thought I was going to say like 150, 200. I was like, no, we probably get about 500,000 people every year. Like, what? But for them to be able to sort of push back against what people think and what people perceive of them, and for me, it's just going to be just a really, really powerful thing for them. They're there, they can hold that space.
Something is, Jada is helping somewhere. I love the young people in DC, and I always liken it to Meet Me in St. Louis at the very end when Judy Garland says, just to think, people come from all over the world to see this, and this is in our own backyard. DC is your home, and I love that you're saying, don't let them limit you to a street, And I think the Folk Life Festival is going to take on even greater meaning this year.
I hope so.
At what point do you think that we are passing the torch, or is it that we're all holding on to the torch to keep the light burning?
I think we're all holding on to it. So again, we don't always recognize that there's things happening right now. Every week I'm in a meeting, they're always on their phones, and but sure, but so is everybody else. And not only that, I don't think that, I think we get caught in what the sort of the surface of what we're seeing. I was at last spring I was out in San Fernando, California, with this youth mariachi academy, apprenticeship program. And first of all, I was in a meeting with their directors before we went into the session, and the kids were kind of milling about because they really wanted to get into the room. And they got, I want to say it was a Tuesday, yeah, I think it was a Tuesday. And they worked until about 9 in the evening, and these were like high school kids, and I know they had school the next day. They were
trying to shame us? Because I don't know if we can do that. I know somebody's already looked at their phone.
Yeah.
It's taking a little longer than I thought. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but it is. I think that we have to give credit where credit's due. I was a young teaching artist. I didn't know what I was doing. It was like I probably had more like I was cocky. It was probably cockier than I was talented. But I felt like I had when I was doing this work, I felt like I had something to say, and and this every generation has something to say.
The question is, who's going to listen? How are we going to make sure, how can we be the curators of our own stories within our community? Sitar is that noise maker, music maker, making sure that voices are heard. How can we individually step up? Because quite frankly, some of us just aren't sure where to start. This is your vocation. This is what you do well. How can we, within our own space, keep the stories being told within our communities?
I think there's a lot of ways to do that. I think that sometimes we think there has to be an institution or there has to be something there sort of making that story happen. But that story can happen within our own families. That story can happen on the bus in the morning. That story can happen walking along the path. I think the story is there. But when we tell the story, we need to have a listener, and I know that that makes sense in sort of some sort of abstract kind of way, but it does mean that how we tell that story becomes really important, and our approach to our approach to that. So I think that the telling of the story, that we have to be sort of conscious about our listening and who our listeners are, and what they bring to bring to that dialogue. And so again, there's these things that I think that we kind of know innately, but I think sometimes we have to be very conscious and very clear about what that dialogue means.
Intentional.
Yeah, it has to be intentional. Yeah.
Now, we know that the festival will be July 2nd through the 7th at the National Mall. The theme is Youth and the Future of Culture. And we want to do a couple of rapid fire questions with you. And some you may know, some you may not. If the world were a color, what would it be today?
Oh.
I'm just going to tell you. I said red. Fire, danger. Danger, Will Robinson. But what would it be to you?
I think it's that red.
What would you like for the color to be?
I would have to say green. Green, not because red means stop. Green means go, but green also means. But red, no, I take that back. I think red is fine. Red is also life. In a lot of cultures, red is life. So I think it could be red, and it could also be red.
I also love that. The lovely Karen said rainbow. So that this whole world, and I was like, okay, you got me with that one. I'm not going to tear up. Now, we want to go back to your mom. You have 5 words to say to her, wherever you think she may be. 5 words that you want to say to her. What would they be?
Is it a sentence or 5 words?
5 words, because you keep talking because you don't ever want to go. So 5 words.
Heart. Since it's one word, merci. She spoke French.
Oh, Flavia.
Creativity. Love. And laughter. My mother loved to laugh, but I don't know that she was always happy. So I want her to laugh, and I want her to feel that laughter. I want her to know that. Yeah. I want her to want to know that her laughter is laughter of joy, because I'm not always sure she was happy.
And I would ask any of you, if you see Michelle along the way, you can pretend that she might think you're a little nutty, but remember this moment and give her a hearty laugh. That lets her know that you remember her mom as well, because we truly owe her a debt of gratitude for teaching you and inspiring you to be a reader, to be curious, to not give up. I always tell them, my thing is, we bend, we don't break. And you clearly have that in you. I want to ask you, you're a theater major, so while she seems very, very, very demure right now, we know she has some drama. So what role, if there was any role you could play, what would that be?
Well, that's tough, because actually the kind of theater that I did was not, I did popular and participatory theater, and this was theater where we would go out and meet with community members and hear their stories and create work with them. We work with young people who were in the justice system, we work with kids who were runaways, and we work with young people who were in the schools. So I would say that role would be anybody whose stories, somebody needed to hear their stories.
Well, I need you to act out my story. My name is Lydia Rodriguez, and I am thinking about leaving school. They don't understand me, and I'm not sure what's going on with some of these kids. Why should I stay?
I've had that conversation a lot of times, and I think I taught here in DC for 20 years, and probably the thing that I was most effective as a teacher was the fact that I had a story. I wasn't going to say, "Oh, you're so great." I mean, but they were. But I also wasn't, I also was like, we'll figure it out. Don't worry, we got this. And, the number of young people that I was able to mentor just because they could say, really? I was like, yeah, in 10th grade, I'm done with school. Because there's a lot of pressure. You don't feel like people are able to sort of get out of that. You get into this groove and you feel like you can't get out of that groove. And again, that relational work, that heart work means that I can show you my heart, and you see my heart, and my heart is my story, and my story is, a story of twists and turns and tumbling over and getting up and dragging on and all that other business. But to be able to tell share that story, which is what I did when I was teaching, and I have people, I see them on Facebook, I'm so proud of them. They're incredible human beings. I probably had a small part of that, but it's so good, it's so wonderful to see my former students. And they'll say, "Oh, y'all are just talking about that. I learned that in 10th grade. That's when Michelle Banks had me read that book in 10th grade." You're just getting to learn that. I knew this 20 years ago. But that's it. Being able to share my heart, and because that relational work is really.
And she does not like being called doctor, so we're simply going to refer to her as the woman with the heart of gold. And we're going to wrap things up because we could talk forever. Let's remind people, you guys are going to have a chance to do some Q&A. You're also going to have some surveys that we want you to fill out. So get those questions poised and ready. Tell us again about when they can attend the Folklife Festival, if there's a need for volunteers. Yes. How many people, the hundreds of, tell us all of that, and we're going to let you wrap it up.
So the festival is July 2nd through 7th. That's a Wednesday through Monday. And also activities on July 4th. We run from 11 a.m. till 5:30 p.m. We have mariachi singers, Stax Music Academy, a contra dance group from Vermont, Sugar in the Pan. That's the king. I love that name. We have young people, lowrider bikes, and a group from Sacramento who's converted a 1964 Impala to EV technology. We have indigenous language reclamations communities from Alaska, Hawaii, Oklahoma, and upstate New York, where it's young people who are at the vanguard of reclaiming and revitalizing the language in some cases that haven't been used for many years. We have incredible building artists, young people who are apprentices in blacksmithing and plastering and stone carving. The image that was flashing is a young woman, 24 years old, who's a stone carver at the National Cathedral, and she's learning this this trade from people, and a lot of it, a lot of these trades have been carried through families, and she's learning that trade. So there's there's a lot going on. So please come out. One of the special features of this program is that we want to make it a learning space and a collaborative space. So we want other young people to come down who are musicians, who are dancers and performers, to be in workshop with our young people who will be on site. So we'll be reaching out to Sitar to have some of the music students and others come down and have an opportunity to work with the young artists that we'll have on site. And really, when all is said and done, it's a celebration of what's possible. Art is important labor, and we have to feed our bodies, but we also have to feed our creativity. And that when we feed our creativity, we are able to reimagine. And this program is really about us creating a site and a space on the mall where young people have an opportunity to reimagine what the possibilities are. So it's not just this moment in time, it really is about us reimagining and giving them the space to reimagine, giving them support to reimagine. So we're hoping that, as the festival moves forward, that young people will have an even more prominent role in every festival program, not just this one.
Well, thank you so very much. We want everyone to please give the woman with the heart of gold. And we are going to open it up to you guys if you have any questions for Michelle. And we thank you for being candid, for being open, and for being vulnerable. Because you never know what I'm going to ask you. And you guys were great. I know you're a little soggy, but we appreciate you. And if you guys have any questions, she's ready to answer them. We have two down here. Up there. Some of us don't see so well, so if I didn't get that cute. Okay.
I'm just curious, maybe I missed it, but what was your dissertation or your book on?
Thank you.
Oh, so my degree is in sustainability education, and I have been living in Guatemala for the last 22 years, and my focus of my work is this intersection of violence and placemaking. I did my master's thesis on the cultivation of corn in Maya communities in Guatemala, and when I would talk to people about climate change, people would say, "Oh, that started in 1982." They would be really specific, and you continue to talk. Some of you know the Central American Wars were happening during that time, and that period was a genocide in the Maya communities, and for the communities, people understand that to be this period where there was one interview in particular, one of my neighbors, Don Cristola, and he talked to me, that started in 1982. When the soldiers came, they burned our homes, they burned our, they killed people and left their bodies in the fields, they burned seeds, and when they burned the seeds, that, this was a sacrilege. And when the seeds were burned, the spirit of the corn left us, and that's why the land doesn't produce the way it used to. So that was the seed of my dissertation. That this understanding, the way people understand the climate change in the community and their relationship to place. So it's very focused on this desecration of the earth and how that is sort of the environmental degradation in the community. So it's heavy stuff, but it was a story that was given to me, and was given to me many times by many different people, and a lot of my mentors were people that they were kind of waiting for me to take the story and do what I was supposed to with it, and I wasn't doing what I was supposed to with it. And eventually I said, oh, okay, I think that's why, eventually I got the message that this was the story that people wanted me to tell. So, so that was the focus of it.
Amazing.
a DC native also, born and raised in DC.
Yay.
And my question is, so from your time in the past and even now and even for the future, do you feel as if the youth and people who've grown up in the arts or people who want to get into arts have changed the way that DC is or the culture of DC when it comes to art?
You know, and some of this is probably me coming back to the city, like being here more full-time than I've been for a long time. I feel that in some ways there was, and I could be totally wrong about this, and it can, again, this could be a child's perception or a young person's perception. I think that there was probably more in some ways, in some respects, than I feel like than there is now. And I think some of that might have to do with access. And even like sort of the opportunities for learning. So when I was doing those summer youth employment programs, there was something called Arts DC. And we were placed in arts jobs. We did street theater. I learned photography. So my first job that was not just like at somebody's counter, you know, doing whatever, was actually a photography job. So I think that there may have been a little more of that than there is now. But again, I think this could be just me waxing nostalgically too, and I'm not 100% sure. That said, I do know that, you know, Sitar is here, and there are a number of different arts organizations and centers. But I think that some of that too is kind of conflated with the fact that a lot of the people that I grew up with, a lot of the people that, you know, I knew, you know, in later years, can't afford to live in the city anymore. So the perception is also the fact that even though these things exist, it's almost like, in some cases, what's the point? Because people who really want and need them can't afford to be here anymore. So I think that there are a couple of different ways to looking at it. But there's certainly people who still believe in the work and are, you know, making sure the work happens. But I think that for me, at least, sort of, again, it could be the perception may not be 100% accurate, but I do feel like there was more in some respects than there is now.
I'm gonna just ask one more question. I'm gonna ask one more question, sorry. So, in my point of view, I feel like the arts and the culture in DC has changed. So it changed along with the way that people perceive artistry in DC and things. And do you agree with it? And how do you feel about it?
Well, I think that some of those core pieces of the city are gone. I grew up doing street theater with Mike Malone, and who was one of the founders of Ellington. And that was every summer, and there were communities who waited for that. They knew it was going to happen. Because we started at 14th and T, and we went to, these were the things that people knew. Fort DuPont Park in the summer, it was always hopping, there was always something there. There is, but now I think that, I'll be honest, I feel like even though, I feel like there's the segregation in some respects has even gotten more profound in an odd sort of way. And I don't know exactly how to, I'm not 100% sure what that means. But I do think that perhaps people are not accessing. But also just the fact that, again, even the things that do exist, the fact that you can go to and talk to a group of 20 people and none of them have ever been to the festival. This is free,
Yes.
Hi, ladies. I just want to thank you both for your time and thank Sitar for this awesome evening. My name's Blair Blackwell. I'm from Detroit. I'm a Howard grad, so I'm halfway from here. Yeah, for sure. I have a moment of gratitude and also a question. When you were about to get emotional, I was like, ooh, I'll get there. I was like, I'll start crying. But I graduated a year later than I was supposed to at Howard out of the fine arts department. I was a musical theater major. And I had to take a year off because we all know Howard University has a lofty bill at the end of the year. And I couldn't go back to class, and I stayed in DC. I didn't want to go back to Detroit, but I would go to the museum. The museum was my school. And I've never heard anyone say that before. So a moment of gratitude is just thank you, because I've never felt seen in that way of just creating innovative spaces for myself when I wasn't. Yeah, just to continue just being and not giving up on being better and being educated. I would sit on those pretty stone benches and just, I didn't have any money. and luckily, and that's the beautiful part of programming in safe sanctuary spaces that allow us to go and be seen. So thank you for saying that and talking about that. My question is, I am turning 30 this year, and I'm reaching a specific milestone in my life where I'm understanding that the life of a student surpasses school. And I want to know, as accomplished as you are as a creative and an educator, how do you remain a student in your life?
Great question. I'm always learning, so yeah, that's learning should never stop.
Yeah.
And I think that here's Gail Jones, who's a writer, and she talks about when so much of your existence is a part of listening, then you have, some of us have to listen, and some of us have to listen because of issues of safety. Some of us have to be more aware than sort of hyper aware sometimes. And that idea of listening, that radical listening, that sort of always being open, that always being open. So instead of that physical listening, but also that, again, going back to the heart, being open to be able to seek and look and seeing. Yeah. So just drawing on those senses.
Yeah.
To be 30 again. Oh,
I'm excited. 20s were, I'm gonna write a book one day about 20s.
All right.
Yeah, woo, we made it. We survived the 20s. But I'm excited, and thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm a psychotherapist, and I work with a lot of kids who I just see them so much in your story. And so first I'll just thank you. I'm glad I went up here. But I'm a narrative therapist, and I hear this narrative gap in your story, and I just want to know it so badly. So you tell me anything you want to tell me, but I just hear from this kid, this autodidact, as you put it. I see so many kids who are learning better missing school than they were learning in school, and it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell to get them engaged. I can see their point, but they also are aware in society of the consequences of that, right? And then I hear you landing in a school environment where you are engaged and that light comes on. And I really want to know what happened in between there, that gap.
Yeah, what's funny is that getting through high school, whatever, landing in school was more about the work that I've done. I've always worked. When I first started teaching, when I first started teaching, I ended up teaching not because I had a degree in teaching, I had these degrees, but I started teaching because I'd done theater work and I'd worked with young people, and someone said, well, you ever thought about teaching? I said, I can't teach, I haven't finished my degree yet. And he's like, well, let's work around that. I won't tell you where, because they may get in trouble. So even work as a curator, not because of my academic work, but because of my work in the world. I was a participant in a festival program, a DC program. I was a stage manager a bunch of times. I was a presenter, which is basically a moderator for sort of a cultural liaison with professional participants and the public. So I'd done all these different roles. And somebody's like, and somebody was watching me and said, I think we might want to talk to you about being a curator because you know these different pieces. So I don't want to tell, God knows I don't want to tell anybody, don't go to school, don't do any of this. Yeah, it's a shame. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that there's ways to get to these places without, I want to be very careful. I do think that I think that maybe what I'm saying is that we want to be making sure people recognize that all of the work that we do, all of the things that we do, the books we read, the plays we're part of, all of these things can feed into what this final role is. I think that would be the safe way to say it. I'm certainly not saying quit school, but I am saying that if we, so again, coming back to Sitar or any these programs like this, is that if we create these other possibilities, then these things will align. That's it. I come to I think that things will align if we create these other possibilities. So when I was teaching, our students had to do internships, and there were students who struggled with the classes, but when they went to their internships, they were incredible. They got there, they were on time, they were like talking, and they were doing things that I couldn't get them to do in the classroom. I did travel courses. I took students to Mexico. I had students in Guatemala. I had kids on, driving up from San Diego to San Francisco on U.S. immigration courses. And it was oftentimes, sometimes I would get the roster and it's like, oh no, so-and-so's in that class, what am I going to do? And you get them in the field and they become this completely different person. So I think that that's what it is. These, without getting into like my own story too much, but I do think that as much as we can create other possibilities and spaces for people to grow and be creative and learn, then I think that things will eventually align. I hope that sort of answered some of that.
I think we're probably running out of time. Just want to say your life is the personification of the Gestalt. You are the sum of many parts, and we will say that they all got put together perfectly. So we want to say thank you. And we will have an opportunity, if anything else that you guys want us to talk about, you'll get a chance to chat. There's a survey, and please remember, put it on your calendar. You don't have to go to all the days, but you can. But continue to support, because you're not only supporting, you're actually going to be supporting a Sitar intern.
That's right, yeah.
But we are supporting DC and we are supporting the future when we are able to be part of this. And thank you again. And that wraps it up. And thanks again for asking me. Big shout out to my dearest friend Karen. And what an honor it was to just sit and chat with you. And I did not make you cry. We was close. We did okay. Thanks, guys.